Some wounds never heal. They just learn to hide beneath the surface, waiting for the right moment to split open again. Holden Mercer had spent 10 years learning to live with his. Not healing, just surviving. Moving through days that blurred together like rain on a windshield, each one indistinguishable from the last. The apartment smelled like coffee and sawdust. It always did. Holden stood at the kitchen counter, hands wrapped around a chip mug, watching steam rise in the pale morning light. Outside, the city of Toledo was grinding to life. Delivery trucks rumbled past on streets still wet from overnight rain. A dog barked somewhere in the distance, the familiar hiss of a bus pulling away from the curb 3 blocks over. He had lived in this place for 8 years now. A small 2-room apartment on the 3rd floor of a building that had seen better decades. The furniture was mismatched, picked up from thrift stores or salvaged from curbsides on trash day. Nothing fancy, nothing that felt like home. Because home was a word that had lost its meaning a long time ago. At 52, Holden Mercer was a man built for work. His shoulders still carried the breadth of someone who had spent decades lifting, carrying, fixing things that other people had broken. His hands were calloused, scarred in places where tools had slipped or materials had bitten back. Gray touched his temples now and threaded through the stubble on his jaw. His eyes, a faded blue that had once been bright, held the kind of quiet that comes from years of keeping thoughts locked away. The red toolbox sat on the kitchen table behind him. He had pulled it out last night after the letter arrived. Just looking at it made something tighten in his chest. A pressure he could not name. Holden took another sip of coffee and turned to face the envelope. White. Official-looking. The return address was from a law firm he had never heard of. Morrison and Associates out in some rural county 3 states away. He had opened it last night, read it twice, then set it down and stared at the wall until midnight. His father was dead. The words sat heavy in his mind, refusing to settle into anything that made sense. Silas Mercer, 78 years old, passed away in his sleep 3 weeks ago. Holden had not known. They had not spoken in over a decade. Not since the custody hearing. Not since the day Holden's entire world collapsed, and his father had stood at the back of the courtroom, silent as stone, and then walked out without a single word. That silence had haunted Holden for 10 years. He had interpreted it 1,000 different ways. Disappointment, shame, abandonment. His own father watching him lose everything and saying nothing, doing nothing, just leaving. The letter said Silas had left him something, an inheritance, not money. Silas had never had much of that, but property, a piece of land in a place called Mercer Springs population, just under 2,000 and whatever structure was on it. The lawyer's letter was vague on details. Just an address and a formal request that Holden come in person to sign papers and take possession. Holden set the mug down and picked up the letter again. The address meant nothing to him. He had never heard his father mention Mercer Springs. But then Silas Mercer had never been one for long conversations. The man had spent 40 years working merchant marine vessels, gone for months at a time, returning with sun-weathered skin and stories he never quite told. Holden's mother had died when he was 12, and After that, it was just the two of them in a small house near the Cleveland docks. Silas would leave for voyages and Holden would stay with neighbors or when he got older by himself. They had existed in parallel lives that occasionally intersected for a week or two between ships. Holden had loved his father in that distant, aching way you love someone who is never quite there, always waiting for a connection that never fully formed. He walked to the window and looked down at the street below. A woman was pushing a stroller. An old man sat on a bench reading a newspaper. Normal people doing normal things, living normal lives. Holden used to be one of them once. He used to have a family. The memories always started the same way. Lenore. Dark hair that caught the sunlight. A laugh that made him feel like everything might actually turn out okay. They had met when he was 28, married a year later. She had been the daughter of money, something Holden did not fully understand until he met her parents, Dorothea and Garrett Prescott. Old money. The kind that came with expectations and control. They had not approved of Holden, a handyman, a blue-collar worker with no college degree and no prospects beyond fixing other people's problems. But Lenore had loved him, and for a while that had been enough. Celia was born 2 years into their marriage, a tiny thing with Lenore's dark hair and Holden's blue eyes, the best thing that had ever happened to him. He remembered holding her in the hospital, this impossibly small person, wrapped in a white blanket, and feeling something shift inside him. Like the world had suddenly reorganized itself around her. Everything before that moment seemed like preparation. Everything after was supposed to be the real thing. They had been happy, not perfect. No family ever is, but happy. Holden worked hard, came home tired, and Lenore managed their little house while Celia toddled after her. They had routines. Pancakes on Sunday mornings. Evening walks when the weather was nice. Bedtime stories that always ended with Celia asking for just one more. The kind of life that does not seem special until it is gone. Then Lenore got sick. It happened slowly at first. She was tired all the time, complained of headaches and nausea. Doctors ran tests but could not find anything definitive. She seemed to get better for a while, then worse again. Holden remembered the fear that had started to creep into their home. The way Lenore would dismiss his concerns, saying she was fine, just needed rest. He remembered the morning he found her collapsed on the bathroom floor, the ambulance, the hospital, the way the doctors spoke in careful, measured tones that told him nothing and everything at once. Brain hemorrhage, they said. Rare, unpredictable. Nothing anyone could have done. She died 3 days later. Celia was 6 years old. Holden had barely begun to process the grief when Dorothea and Garrett appeared. Not to mourn with him, not to help with Celia. They came to take her. The memory of that first confrontation still burned. Dorothea standing in his living room like she owned it. Garrett behind her, silent but looming. Their lawyers had already been contacted. Papers were already being drawn up. "You cannot care for her properly," Dorothea had said. Her voice was cold, clinical, like she was discussing a business transaction rather than a child. "You work all day. You can barely support yourself. Celia needs stability. She needs family. I am her family, Holden had said. I am her father. And we are her grandparents. We have the means to give her everything she needs. You have nothing. The custody battle had been swift and brutal. The Prescotts hired expensive lawyers who painted Holden as negligent, unstable, potentially dangerous. They brought witnesses who testified that he had been absent, that Lenore had managed everything alone, that he had failed as a husband and would fail as a father. One witness in particular had destroyed him. A woman named Nadine Calloway. She had been their neighbor, someone Holden had considered friendly. She testified that she had seen Holden yelling at Lenore, that she had heard raised voices through the walls, that she had been concerned for Lenore's safety. Holden barely remembered the incident she described. Some argument about money, probably. Stress making both of them sharp. But in the courtroom, filtered through expensive lawyers and careful questioning, it sounded like abuse, like a pattern, like proof that Holden Mercer was not fit to raise his own daughter. The judge, an older man with thin lips and cold eyes named Whitfield, had listened to it all. He had asked few questions. His expression had remained neutral throughout. And then he had ruled in favor of the Prescotts. Supervised visitation only pending further review. Holden had tried. God knows he had tried. He showed up for every scheduled visit, brought toys and books, tried to make Celia smile. But Dorothea was always there, watching, making notes. After 3 months, she filed a motion claiming Holden was disruptive and confusing the child, that his presence was harmful to Celia's emotional development, that it would be better for everyone if the visits stopped. His lawyer said they could appeal, but appeals cost money. Holden did not have. The Prescotts had bottomless resources. They could drag the fight out for years, bleeding him dry, while Celia grew up thinking her father had abandoned her. So Holden had stopped fighting. Not because he did not love Celia, not because he did not want her, but because every visit had ended with her crying when he had to leave, because the supervised hours felt like torture for both of them, because he was exhausted and broken and did not know how to fight people with that much power. He told himself it was temporary, that he would find a way, that he would rebuild and come back stronger. But days became weeks. Weeks became months. Months became years. And the temporary surrender became a permanent absence. He moved to Toledo, took whatever work he could find, handyman jobs, repairs, small construction projects, anything that kept his hands busy and his mind from wandering too far into the past. He built a life that was not really a life, just an existence, a way of filling the hours between waking and sleeping. 10 years. Celia would be 16 now. A young woman. Holden wondered if she remembered him. Probably not. Or if she did, it was the version Dorothea had created. The father who abandoned her. The failure who was not strong enough to stay. The thought made his chest ache in a way that never really went away. Holden looked back at the toolbox sitting on the table. Red metal dented and scratched with his father's initials stamped on the side. SM in faded black letters. Silas had given it to him when Holden was 15, handed it over without ceremony. "You will need this," he had said. That was it. No explanation. No life lessons. Just the toolbox and the assumption that Holden would figure out the rest. He had carried it through every job, every apartment, every version of his life. Inside were the tools Silas had used and the ones Holden had added over the years. Wrenches, screwdrivers, a hammer with a worn wooden handle. Everything he needed to fix things. Everything except what was actually broken. Holden picked up the letter again and read the address one more time. Mercer Springs. He pulled out his phone and searched for it. A tiny town in a rural Ohio county surrounded by farmland and forests. The kind of place that probably had one diner, one gas station, and not much else. The lawyer said the property included a structure. No details on what kind. Silas had never mentioned owning land anywhere. He had rented the same small house near the Cleveland docks for 30 years. Lived simply. Saved nothing as far as Holden knew. Where had this property come from? And why leave it to Holden now after all this silence? Part of him wanted to ignore it. Sell the land sight unseen through some real estate agent. Take whatever money it brought and move on. Keep his head down. Keep surviving. But another part, a part he thought he had buried a decade ago, wanted to know. Wanted to understand why his father had stood silent in that courtroom. Why Silas had walked away without a word. What he had been thinking all these years. Holden went to his bedroom and pulled a duffel bag from the closet. He did not pack much. A few changes of clothes, toiletries, the letter. He hesitated, then grabbed the framed photograph from his nightstand. Celia, at 4 years old, sitting on his shoulders, laughing at something off camera. Lenore had taken that picture at a park near their house. One of the last good days before everything changed. He wrapped the frame in a shirt and tucked it carefully into the bag. Back in the kitchen, Holden picked up the red toolbox. Solid, heavy, familiar. If there was a structure on this property, it probably needed work. And if Holden knew anything in this world, it was how to work. He locked the apartment, walked down 3 flights of stairs, and stepped out into the morning. His truck was parked at the curb. An old Ford, more rust than paint, but it ran. He tossed the bag and toolbox in the bed, climbed into the cab, and sat there for a moment. The city stretched out around him. People moving through their days, living their lives. He had been one of them for so long now. Anonymous, safe, small. But something was pulling him away. Maybe it was the property. Maybe it was the need to see what his father had left behind. Maybe it was the faint, desperate hope that somewhere in all of this there was an answer to the question that had haunted him for 10 years. What really happened? Holden started the engine, pulled away from the curb, and headed for the highway. The drive took most of the day. Hours of highway stretching endlessly ahead, the landscape slowly shifting from urban sprawl to suburbs to farmland. The radio cycled through country stations and static-filled news reports. He stopped once for gas and bad coffee at a truck stop, then kept going. The sky was beginning to turn orange when he saw the sign. Mercer Springs population, 1,847. Welcome. The town was exactly what he had imagined. A main street lined with a handful of shops. A diner with a weathered sign that read, Nadine's Place. A post office. A bar called the Iron Anchor. A hardware store that looked like it had been there since the 1950s. People moved slowly here. An old man sitting on a porch. a woman sweeping the sidewalk in front of a flower shop. They watched his truck pass with the mild interest small towns always reserve for strangers. Holden followed the directions the lawyer had given him. Past the main street down a two-lane road that curved through farmland. Past a rusted mailbox. Past a stand of oak trees just starting to show their fall colors. Past a gate that hung half open on broken hinges. Then he saw it. The property was at the end of a long dirt driveway surrounded by overgrown grass and tangled bushes that had not been trimmed in years. And in the center of it all, impossibly unbelievably, was a ship. Not a boat. A ship. Massive. Rusting. Tilted slightly to one side like a sleeping giant that had decided to rest in this field and never left. The hull was covered in patches of brown and orange decay. Vegetation had grown up around it, weeds and wild grass climbing toward the deck like nature was trying to reclaim what humans had abandoned. The superstructure rose against the fading sky, a tower of metal and memories that had no business being here miles from any ocean. Holden stopped the truck, killed the engine, sat there staring through the windshield at something that made no sense. His father's ship. He recognized it now. The vessel Silas had commanded for the last 15 years of his maritime career. Holden had visited it once as a child, maybe 10 years old, when Silas had brought him aboard during a rare port visit. He remembered being awestruck by the size of it. The endless hallways, the engine room that hummed with power, the captain's quarters where his father had let him sit in the big chair and pretend to give orders. Now it sat here, in a field in rural Ohio, half buried in earth and rust. How? Why Holden got out of the truck, slowly, never taking his eyes off the vessel. Up close, it was even more overwhelming. The hull towered above him, metal plates scarred by decades of salt water and neglect. A makeshift gangway had been constructed, weathered wooden planks, leading up to a gap in the hull, where an access door had been cut. He climbed aboard. The deck creaked and groaned under his weight. Everything smelled like rust and rot, and something faintly sweet like old wood finally giving up its fight against time. Debris was scattered everywhere. Coiled ropes gone gray with age. Equipment that had not been used in years. The wheelhouse windows were cracked, some missing entirely. Holden made his way carefully across the deck, testing each step, until he reached the door to the captain's quarters. It was unlocked. Inside, the air was stale but surprisingly dry. Someone had taken care to seal this space against the elements. The captain's quarters were small but intact. A desk, a chair, a narrow bed with blankets still folded at the foot. Bookshelves lined one wall filled with maritime manuals and navigation charts. And on the desk in the center of everything was an envelope with his name written on it. Holden. His father's handwriting. Blocky. Precise. Unmistakable. He picked up the envelope with hands that had started to shake without his permission. Inside was a single key, old and brass, and a note written on yellowed paper. Holden, everything you need is here. I am sorry I could not do more when it mattered, but I never stopped trying. The truth is in this ship. Find it. Use it. Make things right. Dad Holden read it 3 times. Then a 4th. The words blurred together as something cracked open inside his chest. I never stopped trying. What did that mean, trying to do what? And why here? Why this ship stranded in a field like some forgotten monument? He looked around the cabin, at the desk with its drawers and compartments, at the bookshelves crammed with papers and charts, at the walls themselves solid metal that could hide anything. His father had left him a message, a puzzle, a direction. The truth is in this ship. Holden set the note down carefully. He placed the toolbox on the desk and opened it, looking at the familiar tools inside. Then he pulled out a flashlight and began to search. The first hours yielded little. He went through the desk drawers methodically. Pens, pencils, old receipts, insurance documents, maritime certifications. Nothing that seemed significant. The bookshelves held navigation manuals and weather reports, technical documents about the ship's systems. A few novels, their spines cracked from reading. It was not until Holden found the locked drawer that things changed. Third drawer down on the right side of the desk. The lock was old but solid. The key from the envelope did not fit. Holden studied it for a moment, then went to his toolbox and retrieved a small tension wrench and pick. Skills from a misspent youth back when he and his friends thought breaking into abandoned buildings counted as adventure. He worked the lock carefully, feeling for the pins, listening for the telltale clicks. After a few minutes, he heard it catch. The drawer slid open. Inside was a leather-bound book, a ship's logbook, the kind captains were required to keep. Holden lifted it out carefully. The cover was worn smooth from years of handling. The pages were yellowed and stiff. He opened it to the first entry and stopped breathing. The date was from 11 years ago, right around the time Lenore had gotten sick. He flipped through slowly, his father's handwriting filling every page. Dates, times, weather conditions, course headings, standard maritime documentation for the first half of the book. Then, about halfway through, everything changed. The entries became longer, more detailed, and they were not about the ship anymore. They were about Dorothea Prescott. September 12th. Received a call from Dorothea Prescott today. She asked about Holden's work schedule, whether he is home with Celia regularly. Told her it was none of her business. She said it would become her business soon enough. Hung up. September 19th. Dorothea called again. More direct this time. Said she has been watching Holden and Lenore taking notes. Said Lenore is struggling and Holden is not equipped to handle the situation. Asked what situation. She would not say. Kept talking about Celia's welfare. Told her to leave my son alone. October 3rd. Lenore called me today. First time in months. She sounded scared. Said her mother has been showing up unannounced, bringing doctors, insisting Lenore needs help. Lenore says she feels fine most days, just tired. Asked if Holden knows. She said she does not want to worry him. Told her to document everything. Keep a record. Just in case. Holden's hands were shaking now. Lenore had called his father. She had been scared, and she had reached out to Silas, and Holden had never known. He kept reading. October 10th. Dorothea Prescott left a voicemail. Did not call back. The message was clear enough. She is preparing something. I have started making my own documentation. Called a lawyer friend, asked about grandparents' rights in custody cases. Did not like what I heard. October 15th. Lenore is gone. Holden called barely coherent. Brain hemorrhage. I am heading back to port early. Should arrive in 3 days. God help us. October 18th. Made it to the hospital. Too late. Lenore has already been buried. The Prescotts arranged everything. Did not wait for Holden to make decisions. Dorothea looked at me during the service like she had already won something. Garrett just stood there empty. November 2nd. The Prescotts filed for custody today. Knew it was coming. Talked to Holden, tried to convince him to fight harder. But he is destroyed. Cannot blame him. I have hired a private investigator to look into Dorothea's background. Something is not right about Lenore's death. Holden stopped reading. He set the logbook down and pressed his palms against his eyes, trying to breathe through the tightness in his chest. His father had known. Silas had seen what was coming. He had tried to help, had hired investigators, had been working behind the scenes while Holden fell apart in front of him. And Holden had spent 10 years believing his father did not care. After a moment, he picked up the logbook again. November 14th. P. I found something. Dorothea's first husband died 23 years ago. Thomas Whitmore. Fell down the stairs at their home ruled accidental. But there were inconsistencies in the police report. Witnesses who were never interviewed. Dorothea inherited everything. Nobody questioned it because she came from money anyway. November 20th. Attended the custody hearing. Sat in the back. Wanted to testify about Dorothea's threats. But Holden's lawyer said it would seem biased. Angry father defending his son. The Prescott's lawyers were too good. Too professional. They made Holden look like a failure. Nadine Calloway testified against him. Said she saw him yelling at Lenore. Nadine looked terrified the whole time, like someone had a gun to her back. November 21st. They took Celia. Judge Whitfield ruled for supervised visitation only. I watched Holden fall apart. Wanted to say something. Anything. But what good are words now? I failed him. Failed Lenore. Failed Celia. But I am not done yet. December 1st. P. I confirm suspicions about Nadine Calloway. The Prescotts paid off her mortgage 2 weeks before the hearing. $30,000. Transferred directly from Garrett Prescott's account to her bank. Nadine testified because she had no choice. They bought her. They bought the whole damn thing. December 15th. Collected evidence. Photos. Financial records. Recorded phone calls. Everything I could find. Took it to a lawyer. He said it is compelling but would need to be presented carefully. Any misstep and the Prescott's lawyers would bury us. He advised waiting, building a stronger case. I told him we do not have time. He told me we do not have a choice. The entries continued. Months. Then years. Silas Mercer had spent a decade collecting evidence. He had documented everything. Phone records showing Dorothea's calls before Lenore's death. Financial documents proving the bribe to Nadine. Medical records Silas had somehow obtained showing Lenore had visited multiple doctors in the weeks before she died with symptoms no one could explain. Witness statements from people who knew the Prescotts and had their own stories of intimidation and control. all of it carefully logged, cross-referenced, organized. The final entry was dated 3 months ago. I am dying. Doctor says 6 months, maybe less. Cancer. Spent my whole life on ships, and it is my own body that sinks me. I have transferred the property to Holden in my will. The ship is here in Mercer Springs on land I bought 15 years ago for this exact purpose. Everything is hidden in these walls. Evidence, documents, recordings. I have left him a map, a trail to follow. He will understand when he is ready. I could not save Lenore. I could not stop the Prescotts then. But maybe even now I can give Holden a chance to make things right. To get his daughter back. Tell him I am sorry I was not stronger. Tell him I never stopped fighting even when he could not see it. Tell him well. He will read this himself. Holden, if you are reading this, you deserve better from me. From all of us. But you still have time. Do not waste it. The truth is in this ship. Find it. Use it. Bring Celia home. Holden closed the logbook slowly. His hands were shaking. His throat felt tight like something was pressing against it from the inside. His father had been fighting the whole time. Quietly. In the background. While Holden gave up and walked away, Silas had kept going. Building a case. Gathering evidence. Preparing for a day when his son would be ready to fight again. And now Silas was gone. Leaving only this, a ship full of secrets and a decade's worth of evidence against the people who had destroyed Holden's life. He stood up and walked to the porthole. The sun had set completely now. Stars were beginning to appear in the darkening sky. Somewhere out there, 3 states away, Celia was living with people who had lied and bribed and possibly done far worse to keep control of her. Holden had spent 10 years in survival mode, working, sleeping, avoiding anything that hurt too much to think about. He had let the Prescotts win because fighting them had felt impossible. But his father had built him a weapon. Now he just had to figure out how to use it. Holden turned back to the cabin, looked at the shelves, the drawers, the walls. His father had said everything was hidden here. A map, a trail, evidence that could bring the truth to light. He picked up the toolbox and set it on the desk, opened it to reveal the familiar tools inside. Then Holden Mercer got to work. He searched for hours, through the desk, the closet, behind panels and under floorboards. The ship was a maze of hiding places, and Silas had used them all. Behind a false panel in the closet, he found a wooden box. Inside were more documents. Financial records showing payments from Garrett Prescott to various people. Not just Nadine Calloway. A court clerk. A social worker who had evaluated Holden's home. Small amounts individually. Nothing that would raise immediate red flags. But together they formed a pattern. The Prescotts had bought testimony. Piece by piece. Person by person. Holden photographed everything with his phone, made notes, organized what he had found. It was well past midnight when exhaustion finally caught up with him. He had not eaten since the truck stop coffee that morning. His eyes burned. His back ached from hunching over documents. But he could not stop. Not yet. Not when he was finally beginning to understand. He needed more. He needed to know everything his father had found, and he needed to talk to the one person who might be able to fill in the gaps. Nadine Calloway, the woman who had testified against him, the neighbor who had helped the Prescotts take his daughter. According to his father's notes, she had been coerced, blackmailed with her own mortgage. Maybe after all these years she would be willing to tell the truth. Holden looked at the clock. Past 1 in the morning. Too late to do anything tonight. He found a blanket in one of the storage compartments, lay down on the narrow bed in the captain's quarters. The ship groaned and settled around him, metal adjusting to the cooling night air. For the first time in a decade, Holden felt something other than emptiness, something other than grief. He felt purpose. Tomorrow he would go into town, find Nadine, start putting the pieces together. But tonight, surrounded by his father's secrets, Holden allowed himself to hope. Just a little. Just enough to keep going. He closed his eyes and slept. The morning light woke him early, gray dawn filtering through the salt-stained portholes. Holden rose stiffly, muscles protesting the unfamiliar bed, and made his way out onto the deck. The ship looked different in daylight, less ominous, more sad. A monument to a life his father had left behind, dragged here to serve one final purpose. Holden climbed down the gangway and walked to his truck. His phone showed a few missed calls from numbers he did not recognize. Probably the lawyer's office, wondering if he had arrived. He would deal with that later. First breakfast, and then a conversation 10 years overdue. He drove back into town as Mercer Springs was waking up. The diner he had noticed yesterday, Nadine's place, had lights on and cars in the parking lot. He pulled in, killed the engine, and sat there for a moment. Nadine Calloway, the woman who had helped destroy his life, who had looked him in the eye during that courtroom and told lies that took his daughter away. But according to his father's notes, she had been a victim too. Trapped by her own debts, forced to choose between her home and someone else's child. Holden did not know if he could forgive her, but he needed to talk to her, needed to understand what she knew, needed to find out if she would help him now. He got out of the truck and walked into the diner. It was a small place, a counter with red vinyl stools, booths along the windows, the smell of coffee and bacon and something sweet baking in the back. A few early customers sat scattered around, farmers mostly based on their worn boots and weathered hands. Behind the counter stood a woman in her 60s, gray-streaked hair pulled back in a practical ponytail, tired eyes that had seen too many early mornings. She was pouring coffee for a man in overalls when Holden walked in. She looked up. Their eyes met, and Holden saw recognition flash across her face. Then, something more complicated. Fear, guilt, and underneath it all, something that might have been relief. "Sit anywhere," she said. Her voice was steady, but her hand trembled slightly as she set down the coffee pot. Holden took a booth by the window. The woman brought him a menu and a cup of coffee without asking. Up close, he could see the years on her face, the lines around her eyes, the tension in her shoulders. "You are Silas's son," she said quietly, not a question. Holden nodded. And you are Nadine Calloway. She flinched at her own name. Yes. I think we need to talk. Nadine glanced around the diner. The other customers were paying no attention, lost in their own conversations and newspapers. But she shook her head slightly. Not here, she said. Tonight, 7 o'clock. My house. She pulled a pen from her apron and wrote an address on her order pad, then tore off the sheet and set it on the table. I have been waiting 10 years for you to show up. I have a lot to tell you. Before Holden could respond, she walked away to the kitchen. He sat there staring at the address. Nadine Calloway wanted to talk. Had been waiting for him. That meant his father had been in contact with her. Had been building this case with her help, even as she continued living in the same town where it all began. What else had Silas set in motion? Holden ordered breakfast, ate mechanically, tasting nothing. His mind was already racing ahead, to tonight's conversation, to the evidence hidden in the ship, to the decade of lies and manipulation that had stolen his daughter. When he finished, he left cash on the table and walked out without looking back. Back at the ship, Holden resumed his search. The daylight made it easier to see. He found hiding places he had missed the night before, compartments built into the walls, false bottoms in storage lockers. His father had been thorough. By late afternoon, he had assembled a substantial collection of evidence, financial records, photographs, handwritten notes from Silas's investigation. The picture was becoming clearer with every document he found. The Prescotts had not just bribed Nadine. They had built a network of influence. The judge who had ruled against Holden, this Whitfield, had a gambling problem. Records showed payments from the Prescotts that coincided with his most significant debts. The social worker who had evaluated Holden's home had received a consulting fee from a company that traced back to Garrett Prescott's holdings. It was systematic, calculated, a machine designed to take Celia away from her father. But why? What had made Dorothea Prescott so determined to have custody of her granddaughter that she would corrupt an entire legal process? And what had really happened to Lenore? That question haunted Holden as he worked. His father's notes suggested Silas had suspected something darker than a natural death. The timing, the symptoms, the way Dorothea had moved so quickly afterward, as if she had been waiting, planning. But suspicion was not proof, and proof was what Holden needed. At 6:30, he locked up the ship and drove to the address Nadine had given him. Her house sat on a quiet street at the edge of town. Small, neat, flower boxes in the windows. A porch light clicked on as Holden pulled into the driveway. She had been watching for him. The front door opened before he reached it. Nadine stood there in different clothes than she had worn at the diner. A simple sweater and slacks. She looked smaller somehow, more vulnerable. "Come in," she said. The living room was comfortable. Worn furniture, family photographs on the walls, the smell of something baking. It looked like the home of a grandmother, not a woman who had helped tear a family apart. Nadine gestured to the couch. Holden sat. She took the chair across from him, hands folded in her lap. "I have been waiting 10 years to have this conversation," she said. "Your father told me you would come eventually. I just did not know when." Tell me about the testimony, Holden said. His voice was flat, controlled. Tell me why you lied. Nadine took a breath. I did not lie exactly. I did see you and Lenore arguing that day. I did hear raised voices. But it was not what they made it sound like in court. It was a normal disagreement, the kind every married couple has. You were not threatening her. You were not violent. You were just two stressed people trying to figure out how to pay bills and raise a child. Then why make it sound like abuse? Because Dorothea Prescott told me to. The words hung in the air between them. Nadine's hands trembled slightly. She came to my house 6 weeks before the hearing, said she knew I was behind on my mortgage, that the bank was about to foreclose. She had all the details, how much I owed, when the payments were due. I do not know how she got that information, but she had it. And she made you an offer. Yes. Testify about what I had seen. Make it clear you had a temper. And she would pay off my mortgage, $30,000. So you agreed. I had 2 kids at home. I was going to lose my house, my whole life. Nadine met his eyes. Yes, I agreed. I am not proud of it. I have never been proud of it. But that is the truth. Holden felt the anger rise in his chest. But underneath it was something else. Understanding, maybe. Nadine had been trapped. Just like him. Just a different kind of trap. Your father figured it out, Nadine continued. He came into the diner about a year after the hearing, sat down, ordered coffee, and said he knew what I had done. She shook her head. I nearly had a heart attack right there, but he was not there to threaten me. He said he was building a case, collecting evidence, and he wanted me to know that when the time came, I would need to tell the truth, the real truth. Did you agree? I told him everything. The meeting with Dorothea, the money, all of it. He recorded the conversation. I signed an affidavit swearing to what really happened. She paused. It is somewhere in that ship of his, I am guessing. It is. Nadine nodded. Good. Then you have what you need to prove the custody ruling was based on fraud. I need more than that. Holden leaned forward. I need to know what really happened to Lenore. Nadine's expression shifted. Something darker crossed her face. Your father asked me the same thing. I did not have answers then, but I have been paying attention these past 10 years, watching the Prescotts, documenting things your father asked me to track. She stood up, went to a desk in the corner and returned with a folder. Dorothea Prescott is not just controlling. She is dangerous. Holden opened the folder. Inside were notes, dates, photographs taken from a distance. Nadine had been watching the Prescotts for years. 3 years ago, Nadine said quietly, a man came to town asking questions about the Prescott family. A journalist working on some story about influential families in the region. He interviewed people, looked at public records. She paused. Then one day he just left. His car was found abandoned 2 states over. He never came back. Never finished his story. You think Dorothea, I do not know what to think, but I know people stopped asking questions after that. Holden looked at the folder in his hands, felt the weight of what Nadine was telling him. He had been thinking of this as a legal battle, a fight in courtrooms with lawyers and evidence. But if Dorothea was willing to make people disappear, this was something else entirely. "Why are you still here?" he asked. "Why did you not leave after giving my father that statement?" Nadine smiled sadly. "This is my home. My children grew up here. I wasn't going to let Dorothea Prescott drive me away. Besides, your father convinced me I would be safer staying put, acting normal. If I ran, it would look suspicious. So I stayed. Kept the diner open. Waited. For what? For you." She leaned forward. "Your father said when you finally came, it would mean you were ready to fight. That you would have what you needed to bring them down." She paused. "So tell me, are you ready?" Holden thought about the logbook, the letters, the evidence scattered throughout the ship. He thought about Celia, 16 years old now, living with her mother's killer. "I am ready," he said, "but I need more. I need something that cannot be explained away or buried by expensive lawyers." "Your father mentioned photographs," Nadine said. "He said they were the key to everything, hidden somewhere on the ship, somewhere only you would think to look. Somewhere only he would think to look." Holden stood up suddenly. The answer hit him like a wave. The navigation room. When he was a kid visiting the ship, his father had let him play in there. Spin the big wheel. Pretend to be captain. It had been his favorite place on the entire vessel. If Silas wanted to hide something where only Holden would find it, that was where it would be. "I have to go," he said. Nadine walked him to the door. Before he left, she put her hand on his arm. "Be careful. If Dorothea figures out what you are doing, she will not hesitate. She has protected her control over Celia for 10 years. She will not give it up easily. I know. And Holden." She paused. "I really am sorry for what I did, for the part I played in taking your daughter away." Holden looked at this woman who had been trapped by circumstances, who had made a terrible choice and lived with it ever since. He could not forgive her. Not yet. Maybe not ever. But he could understand. "Help me now," he said. "Help me get Celia back. That is how you make it right." Nadine nodded. "Whatever you need." Holden drove back to the property as night settled over the fields. The ship loomed against the stars, massive and silent. He parked, grabbed his flashlight, and climbed aboard. But as he reached the deck, he stopped. Something was wrong. The door to the captain's quarters stood open. He had closed it when he left. He was certain of that. Holden approached slowly, flashlight in one hand, heavy wrench from his toolbox in the other. The door creaked as he pushed it wider. Inside, the cabin had been searched. Drawers pulled open. Papers scattered. Someone had been here. Someone had been looking for the same things he was looking for. On the desk, placed deliberately where he could not miss it, was another note. "Stop digging. Leave town. This is your only warning." Holden crumpled the paper and threw it in the corner. They knew he was here. The Prescotts, or someone working for them, they knew what he was looking for. And they were afraid. Good. Let them be afraid. Holden straightened the cabin, checked to make sure nothing crucial had been taken. The logbook was still there, hidden where he had left it. The documents he had found were still in place. Whoever had searched the ship had not found the real hiding places. They had not known where to look. But Holden did. He headed below deck to the navigation room. It was smaller than he remembered, cramped and dusty from years of disuse. But the ship's wheel was still there, mounted on its pedestal in the center of the room. Charts lined the walls. A desk sat in the corner. Holden walked to the wheel, ran his hands along the spokes, remembered being 10 years old, spinning it as fast as he could, pretending to navigate through storms. The spokes were hollow metal tubes, perfect for hiding small items. He had tucked treasures there as a child. Coins, notes, secret things he did not want his father to find. Silas would have remembered that. Holden shone his flashlight into each spoke, searching. Most were empty. But in the third one he saw something. Paper rolled tight. He reached in carefully and pulled out an envelope. Inside were photographs, 12 of them, Polaroids with dates written on the backs. Holden spread them on the desk and felt his heart stop. The first photograph showed Dorothea Prescott sitting at a restaurant table with a man in a dark suit. Holden recognized him from the custody hearing, Judge Whitfield. The date was 4 months before the hearing. The second photograph showed them again at what looked like a private club, drinks in hand, laughing together, 2 months before the hearing. The third showed just Dorothea and the judge, close together, his hand on her arm, 1 month before the hearing. Holden went through the rest. 12 photographs documenting a relationship between Dorothea Prescott and the judge who had taken Celia away. Not just professional, not just friendly. These were photographs of people who knew each other well, who met regularly, who had the kind of rapport that suggested influence and favors exchanged. At the bottom of the envelope was a note in his father's handwriting. Private investigator took these over 6 months. Judge Whitfield and Dorothea have been connected for years. He owes her money. Borrowed it to cover gambling debts. She paid them off. She owns him. That is why you lost Celia. The fix was in from the start. Holden sat back against the wall. Photographs spread around him, and felt something crack open inside his chest. Not anger this time. Something bigger. Certainty. This was it. This was the evidence he needed. Proof that the custody ruling had been corrupt from the beginning. Proof that Dorothea Prescott had bought a judge to steal his daughter. Combined with the financial records, Nadine's testimony, and everything else hidden in this ship, it was enough. Enough to reopen the case. Enough to expose the Prescotts. Enough to bring Celia home. Holden gathered the photographs carefully, placed them back in the envelope. Then he climbed out of the navigation room and made his way back to the captain's quarters. He had what he needed. Now he needed a plan. Tomorrow he would contact a lawyer. Someone good. Someone who could take this evidence and turn it into action. But tonight he would stay here. Guard what his father had built. and prepare for the fight of his life. Holden lay down on the narrow bed in the captain's quarters. Through the porthole he could see stars. The same stars his father had navigated by for 40 years. Silas Mercer had spent a decade preparing for this moment, collecting evidence, building a case, waiting for his son to be ready. And now Silas was gone. But his work remained. His love remained hidden in the walls of this impossible ship. Holden closed his eyes. "I found it, Dad," he whispered to the empty room. "I found the truth." Tomorrow he would use it. Tomorrow everything would change. Morning came slowly to the ship. Gray light crept through the portholes, casting long shadows across the captain's quarters. Holden woke stiff and disoriented, his body protesting the narrow bed and the cold that had seeped through the metal walls during the night. He lay there for a moment, staring at the ceiling, letting the events of the past 2 days settle into something that felt real. The letter. The ship. His father's logbook. The photographs of Judge Whitfield and Dorothea Prescott, their corruption captured in faded Polaroid colors. It was not a dream. It was not his mind playing tricks after a decade of grief. This was happening. Holden rose stretched and walked to the desk where he had organized his findings the night before. The evidence was still there. The photographs, the financial records, his father's meticulous notes, all of it waiting to be used. But something nagged at him, a piece that did not quite fit. His father had written about Lenore's death, about suspicions that something was wrong, about symptoms that did not make sense. But the logbook entries had been careful, measured. Silas had documented his concerns without making direct accusations, because he had not had proof. Holden needed to find that proof. If Dorothea had done something to Lenore, if his wife's death had not been the tragic accident everyone believed, then the custody case was just the beginning. This was not just about legal fraud. This was about murder. He needed to keep searching. The galley was next on his list. A small kitchen space below deck where the ship's crew would have prepared meals during long voyages. Holden made his way down the narrow stairs, flashlight in hand, and began a systematic search. The cupboards held nothing but dust and the ghosts of provisions long since removed. The appliances had been stripped out years ago, leaving empty spaces where a stove and refrigerator once stood. But Holden was not looking for anything obvious. He tapped on walls, listening for hollow spaces, checked behind panels that seemed slightly out of place, ran his fingers along seams in the metal, feeling for anything that might indicate a hidden compartment. It took almost an hour before he found it. One section of floorboards near where the stove had been did not quite match the rest. The wood grain was slightly different. The nails were newer. Someone had removed this section and put it back. Holden grabbed a pry bar from his toolbox and worked carefully, not wanting to damage anything that might be hidden beneath. The board came up easier than expected. Underneath, wrapped in oilcloth to protect against moisture, was a small wooden box. Holden's hands trembled as he lifted it out. The box was old, but well maintained. A simple latch held it closed. He opened it slowly, almost afraid of what he might find. Inside were letters, dozens of them, folded carefully. The paper yellowed with age, and on the top envelope in handwriting that made Holden's heart clench was a name he had not seen written in 11 years. Lenore. His wife had written these letters to his father. Letters that Holden had never known existed. He sat down on the cold galley floor surrounded by rust and shadows and began to read. Dear Silas, I know we have not always been close, but I need to talk to someone and Holden cannot know yet. He has enough to worry about with work and Celia. I do not want to add to his burden. My mother has been visiting more often lately. She brings doctors with her sometimes. Says she is worried about my health. But, Silas, I feel fine most days. Just tired. Everyone with a young child is tired. Mom insists I need examinations, tests. She talks about my color being off, my energy being low. But I think she is the one who is not well. Not physically. Something else. She wants control. She has always wanted control. And now she wants Emma away from us. I can see it in how she talks, how she looks at me, like I am failing at being her daughter. And Celia deserves better than what Holden and I can give her. I do not know what to do. So I am writing to you. Because you are Holden's father, and because I think you might understand. Love, Lenore Holden set the letter down. His vision had blurred. He wiped his eyes with the back of his hand and picked up the next one. Dear Silas, thank you for your letter. It helped more than you know. You asked me to document everything, to keep a record of what my mother says and does. I have started doing that. Dates, times, what she says, who she brings with her. Something strange happened last week. I found my mother in our house when Holden and I were supposed to be at work. She had let herself in with a key I did not know she had. She said she was just checking on things, making sure Celia's room was clean enough. But Silas, she was going through our papers, our bills, our bank statements. When I confronted her, she laughed it off. Said a mother has a right to know how her daughter is doing financially. I did not tell Holden. He would have been furious. And I do not want to create more conflict. But I am writing it down like you said, just in case. Love, Lenore. The letters continued, week after week, month after month. Lenore had been documenting everything just as Silas had asked. Her mother's unexpected visits, the doctors Dorothea brought, who always seemed to find something wrong, the subtle suggestions that Lenore was not capable of caring for Celia properly. And then the letters took a darker turn. Dear Silas, I need to tell you something, and I need you to believe me even though it sounds impossible. I have been keeping track of my symptoms. The tiredness, the nausea, the headaches that come and go. I started noticing a pattern. I feel worse after I eat at my parents' house. I know how that sounds. I know it seems paranoid. But I have been paying attention. When Holden and I eat at home, I feel fine. When we go to my parents for dinner, I get sick within a day or two, every single time. Last week, I pretended to eat my mother's casserole, but actually threw most of it away when no one was looking. I felt fine the next day. The best I have felt in months. Silas, I think my mother is putting something in my food. I am going to see a doctor. A different doctor. one my mother does not know about. I am going to ask for blood tests, toxicology, whatever they can do. Please do not tell Holden yet. I need proof first, and I need to get through Celia's birthday next week. I do not want to ruin that for her. If anything happens to me, please make sure Holden knows the truth. Make sure Celia knows I loved her more than anything in the world. I am scared, Silas. I am really scared. Love, Lenore. Holden's hands were shaking so badly he could barely hold the paper. He set it down and pressed his palms against his eyes, trying to breathe through the tightness in his chest. Lenore had known. She had figured out what was happening to her. She had been documenting it, planning to go to a doctor, planning to get proof. And then she died. 3 days after writing this letter. 3 days before she could tell anyone what she suspected. At the bottom of the box was one final letter. The paper was different, newer, and the handwriting was not Lenore's. It was Silas's. Holden, if you are reading this, you have found Lenore's letters. I am sorry I could not show them to you sooner. I am sorry for so many things. After Lenore died, I contacted the doctor she mentioned. Dr. Patricia Vance, a toxicologist at a private clinic 2 towns over from where you lived. Lenore had seen her 1 week before her death. She had blood drawn, tests run. The results came back 3 days after Lenore passed. Arsenic levels at 2.3 micrograms per liter. The normal range is 0.02. Lenore had 115 times the normal amount of arsenic in her blood. The doctor sent her findings to the medical examiner's office. They were supposed to trigger an investigation. But the case was closed before the results were even reviewed. Ruled natural causes. Brain hemorrhage. No further inquiry needed. Someone buried those results. Someone with enough power to make a toxicology report disappear. I have spent 10 years trying to find the original documents. I finally obtained them through means I will not describe here. They are in a safety deposit box at First National Bank in Millerton. Box 247. The key is hidden where you used to keep your secrets on this ship. Use what I have gathered. Prove what Dorothea did. Get Celia back. And make sure Lenore did not die for nothing. Your father, Silas Holden, sat motionless on the galley floor, surrounded by his wife's final words. The truth was worse than anything he had imagined. Dorothea Prescott had murdered her own daughter. Slowly, methodically, poisoning her over weeks or months until Lenore's body could not take any more. And then when Lenore died, Dorothea had moved immediately to take Celia, as if she had been waiting, planning, knowing exactly what was gonna happen. Holden had lost his wife to murder. He had lost his daughter to corruption. And he had spent 10 years believing it was all his own failure. The rage that rose in him was unlike anything he had ever felt. Not hot and explosive, cold, deep. The kind of anger that does not burn out. The kind that fuels years of patient, relentless action. Like his father's anger had fueled 10 years of investigation. Holden gathered the letters carefully, returned them to their box, wrapped them in the oilcloth, and placed them back under the floorboards. He could not risk anyone finding them. Not yet. Not until he had the rest of the evidence. the safety deposit box, the medical records, the proof that Lenore had been poisoned. He needed that key. Where you used to keep your secrets on this ship. Holden had already found the photographs in the navigation wheel, but that was not the only place he had hidden things as a child. There was another spot, one even more secret, one he had almost forgotten about until this moment. The anchor chain locker, a cramped space in the bow of the ship where the anchor chain was stored when not in use. Holden had discovered it during one of his childhood visits. He had squeezed inside during a game of hide-and-seek with his father, wedging himself between the massive chain links, certain he would never be found. His father had let him win that game, had pretended to search everywhere else before finally giving up. Young Holden had been so proud of his secret hiding place. Silas had remembered. Holden made his way to the bow of the ship. The anchor locker was harder to access now. Rust had seized some of the fittings, but he worked at it with his tools' patience and determination, wearing down the years of neglect. The hatch finally opened with a screech of protesting metal. Inside the space was exactly as he remembered. Dark. Cramped. The anchor chain long since removed, leaving only the brackets that had once held it. Holden squeezed inside, flashlight gripped between his teeth, and ran his hands along the walls. There. A panel that did not quite sit flush with the others, painted over but slightly raised. He worked it free with a screwdriver. Behind it was a small metal box, barely larger than his hand. Inside, wrapped in oilcloth like everything else, was a brass key. And another note. Box 247. First National Bank, Millerton. This is the proof that seals it. Lenore's medical records from the weeks before she died. Tests she ordered without Dorothea knowing. The toxicology results came back after she was already gone. I paid good money to get these records before they disappeared forever. They prove what Dorothea did. Use them. Make sure Lenore's death means something. Holden clutched the key so tightly it bit into his palm. He had it. The final piece. The evidence that would prove Dorothea Prescott was a murderer. He checked the time. Just past noon. If he left now, he could reach Millerton before the bank closed. But he did not want to go alone. He needed a witness. Someone who could verify the chain of custody. Someone whose testimony would hold up in court. Nadine. Holden drove into town and parked in front of the diner. The lunch rush was in full swing, but Nadine spotted him the moment he walked through the door. Something in his expression must have told her this was urgent. She handed off her order pad to the young woman working the counter and met him by the door. What happened? I found more evidence. Letters from Lenore. My father's notes about her death. Holden kept his voice low. She was poisoned, Nadine. My wife was murdered. And I know where the proof is. But I need someone to come with me. A witness. Nadine did not hesitate. Let me get my coat. They drove to Millerton in Holden's truck. The town was about 2 hours east, larger than Mercer Springs, but still small by any reasonable standard. First National Bank occupied a brick building on Main Street, solid and respectable looking. Holden parked, took a breath, looked at Nadine. Whatever is in that box, he said, it is going to change everything. I know. She met his eyes steadily. That is why I am here. They went inside. A clerk led them to the vault, used the bank's key and Holden's key together to open box 247. Inside was a thick manila envelope. Holden carried it to a private room the bank provided. His hands were shaking as he opened it. Nadine sat across from him, silent, bearing witness. Medical records, dozens of pages, lab tests ordered by Dr. Patricia Vance in the weeks before Lenore's death, blood work, urinalysis, comprehensive metabolic panels, handwritten notes from multiple appointments where Lenore described her symptoms: fatigue, nausea, confusion, muscle weakness, and at the bottom a toxicology report dated 3 days after Lenore died. Elevated arsenic levels detected. Result 2.3 micrograms per liter. Normal range 0.0. 2 to 0.05 micrograms per liter assessment levels consistent with chronic exposure over extended period. Recommendation: immediate investigation for environmental or intentional poisoning. The report was signed by the lab director and stamped with an official seal. Clipped to it was a handwritten note. This report was sent to the medical examiner's office as required by state law. However, I was informed that the ME ruled cause of death as natural causes cerebral hemorrhage before toxicology results were reviewed. When I called to follow up, I was told the case was closed and no further investigation would be conducted. I am maintaining these original results in my files in case they are ever needed. Dr. Patricia Vance. Chief Toxicologist Holden read it twice, 3 times. The words swam before his eyes. Lenore had been poisoned. The lab had caught it. The report had been sent to the medical examiner. And then it had been buried, ignored, made to disappear. Because someone had enough power to make that happen. Someone paid off the medical examiner, Nadine said quietly. She had been reading over his shoulder, or scared him. Otherwise, they would have reopened the case. Holden nodded slowly. He could not speak. The reality of what he was holding was too enormous. His wife had been murdered. The evidence had existed for 11 years, and it had been suppressed by the same people who took his daughter. The rest of the envelope contained more documents. Copies of Lenore's private journal entries, pages she had given to Dr. Vance for safekeeping, notes about feeling sick after meals at her parents' house, photographs she had taken of medications in Dorothea's bathroom, pills Lenore did not recognize, and one more letter. This one addressed to Holden directly. My love, if you are reading this, something has happened to me. I hope I am being paranoid. I hope you are reading this and laughing at how crazy your wife got toward the end. But if I am right, if my mother has been doing what I think she has been doing, then you need to know the truth. I have been sick for months. Not the kind of sick that doctors can explain. The kind of sick that comes and goes. That gets worse after I spend time with my mother. That makes me feel like I'm losing my mind. I think she has been putting something in my food. Arsenic, maybe. I have been reading about it. The symptoms match. I am going to the police after Celia's birthday. I have to wait until then. If I do it now, Mother will find a way to take Celia during the investigation. She will claim I am unstable. that I need help, that Celia is not safe with me. I have to be smart about this. I have to have proof before I make accusations. Please, if something happens to me, do not let my mother near Celia. Do not let her win. She is not well, Holden. She has never been well. She would rather kill me than let me be independent of her. I am so sorry I did not tell you sooner. I thought I could handle this on my own. I thought I was protecting you. I love you. I have always loved you. Please take care of our daughter. Forever yours, Lenore Holden folded the letter carefully. His hands were steady now. The shaking had stopped. In its place was something harder, something colder. Clarity. He looked at Nadine. Her eyes were wet with tears. "This is it," he said. "This is what we needed. Dorothea poisoned Lenore. The lab caught it. The medical examiner buried it. My father found the records and kept them safe. What do we do now? We take this to a lawyer. We take it to the state attorney. And we make sure Dorothea Prescott never hurts anyone again." They drove back to Mercer Springs in silence. Holden's mind was racing, planning next steps. He needed a lawyer, a good one, someone who could take this evidence and turn it into action, someone who would not be intimidated by the Prescott's money and connections. He had done some research the night before, found a family law firm in the state capital with a reputation for taking difficult cases. The lead attorney, a woman named Vera Ashburn, had won several high-profile custody disputes against wealthy opponents. She might be exactly what he needed. But before he could call her, his phone rang. Unknown number, local area code. He answered. "Mr. Mercer." A man's voice. Older, tired. "This is Garrett Prescott. I think we need to talk." Holden nearly drove off the road. "Why would I want to talk to you?" "Because I am dying, and I have information you need." Holden pulled over to the side of the highway. Nadine looked at him with concern. "I am listening," he said into the phone. "Not over the phone. Meet me at the diner in Mercer Springs. 6 o'clock tonight. Come alone." The line went dead. Holden sat there, engine idling, trying to process what had just happened. Garrett Prescott, Dorothea's husband, the man who had stood silently beside her while she destroyed Holden's life. Now he wanted to talk. "Who was that?" Nadine asked. "Garrett Prescott." Her face went pale. "What does he want?" "He says he is dying. Says he has information." Holden put the truck back in gear. "He wants to meet tonight." "It could be a trap." "Maybe. But if there is even a chance he knows something that could help me get Celia back, I have to take it." Nadine was quiet for a moment. Then she nodded. "I will be at the diner tonight, in case anything goes wrong." At 6 o'clock, Holden walked into Nadine's place for the second time that day. The dinner crowd was thin. A few farmers at the counter. A family in one of the booths. And in the far corner, sitting alone with a cup of coffee, was Garrett Prescott. The man looked nothing like Holden remembered. The confident businessman who had stood in courtrooms and lawyers' offices had been replaced by someone hollow, gaunt. His skin had a grayish pallor, and his hands trembled slightly as he lifted his cup. Holden slid into the booth across from him. They studied each other in silence for a long moment. "You look like your father," Garrett finally said. "So I have been told." Silas was a good man, stubborn as hell but good. Garrett coughed a wet, rattling sound that spoke of sickness deep in his chest. "He came to see me once, you know, about 5 years ago. Wanted to know what I knew about Lenore's death." "What did you tell him?" "Nothing. I was a coward then." Garrett set down his coffee cup. "I am still a coward now, I suppose. But I am also dying. Lung cancer. The doctors give me 6 months, maybe less. Why should I care about it? You should not. After what my wife did to you, you have every right to hate me." Garrett met Holden's eyes. "But I did not come here to ask for forgiveness. I came here to tell you the truth." Holden leaned forward. "Then tell me." Garrett was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice was barely above a whisper. "Dorothea killed Lenore." The words hung in the air between them. Holden had known it, had the evidence to prove it. But hearing it spoken aloud by someone who had been there, who had watched it happen, was something else entirely. "I did not know it at the time," Garrett continued. "I suspected, but I did not want to believe it. Lenore was her daughter, her own flesh and blood. What kind of mother would—" He stopped, shook his head. "But Dorothea is not like other mothers. She is not like other people. How did she do it? Arsenic. Small amounts over weeks, maybe months. It made Lenore sick, but not obviously poisoned. The doctors could not figure out what was wrong because they were not looking for poison. By the time Lenore started to realize what was happening, it was too late. The final dose caused the hemorrhage." Holden's hands clenched under the table. "And you knew this?" "I suspected. After Lenore died, I found Dorothea's computer unlocked. She had been researching poisons, symptoms, lethal doses. I confronted her." Garrett's voice cracked. "She told me Lenore was planning to leave, to take Celia away from us, to cut us out of her life completely. Dorothea could not allow that, so she murdered her. She said it was necessary, like putting down a sick animal, like removing an obstacle." Garrett's eyes were wet now. "I should have gone to the police. I should have turned her in. But she is my wife, and she knows things about me, things that would destroy what little is left of my life." "So you stayed quiet?" "Yes. I helped her get custody of Celia. I became complicit in all of it." Garrett reached into his jacket and pulled out a USB drive. "But I cannot die knowing I let my granddaughter stay with a monster. Celia deserves better. She deserves the truth. She deserves you." He slid the USB drive across the table. "What is this?" "Everything I have. Emails between Dorothea and Judge Whitfield, arranging your custody hearing before it even started. Financial records showing payments to witnesses and court officials. The research she did on poisons. Her communications with the medical examiner who buried Lenore's toxicology report." Garrett's hand trembled. "I copied it all before she could delete it. Use it. Bring her down. Save Celia." Holden looked at the USB drive. Such a small thing to contain so much destruction. Why should I trust you? Because I am Celia's grandfather. And I failed her once. I will not fail her again. Garrett stood up slowly, using the table for support. Dorothea knows you are here. She knows what you are looking for. She called me yesterday, told me to handle it, to make you disappear if necessary. And you came here to warn me instead. I came here to try to make things right, or as right as they can be at this point. Garrett looked down at Holden with something like regret. Tell Celia I am sorry. Tell her I loved her even if I did not show it the right way. He walked out of the diner without looking back. Holden sat there, USB drive in hand, watching through the window as Garrett climbed into his car and drove away. Nadine appeared beside him, concern written on her face. What happened? He just confessed to being an accessory to murder, and he gave me everything I need to prove it. Nadine sat down across from him. What now? Now I call a lawyer. And then we end this. Holden spent the rest of the evening organizing everything he had collected. The photographs, the financial records, the letters from Lenore, the medical records from the safety deposit box, the USB drive from Garrett. It was overwhelming. Years of evidence accumulated by his father, supplemented now by Garrett's confession. More than enough to prove that the custody ruling had been fraudulent. More than enough to expose Dorothea Prescott as a murderer. He called Vera Ashburn's office and left a detailed message. The receptionist promised someone would call back first thing in the morning. Then he sat in the captain's quarters surrounded by his father's work and tried to process everything that had happened. His wife had been murdered by her own mother. His daughter had been stolen through corruption and lies. His father had spent a decade building a case to set things right. And now, finally, Holden had what he needed to finish it. He slept fitfully that night. Dreams of Lenore mixing with nightmares of Celia crying for him. He woke before dawn, restless and anxious. At 8 o'clock, his phone rang. Vera Ashburn. She listened to his story without interrupting. When he finished, there was a long pause. "This is substantial," she finally said. The photographs alone would be grounds for appealing the custody decision. Add in the evidence of bribery, the financial records, and the medical proof of poisoning. This is bigger than a custody case. This is judicial corruption and murder. Can we get Celia back? Possibly. But it is going to take time. We will need to file motions, request hearings, potentially bring criminal charges. The Prescotts will fight every step. They will hire the best lawyers money can buy. I do not care how long it takes. I just need to know it is possible. It is possible. More than possible given what you have. Vera paused. I will take your case, but I need you to understand something. This is going to get ugly. The Prescotts will come after you. They will dig up everything they can try to make you look unstable or dangerous. They will drag Lenore's memory through the mud if they think it will help them. I can handle it. Good. Leave the evidence with me. I will start building our case. Do not contact the Prescotts directly. Do not do anything that could be construed as threatening or harassing. Let me handle the legal side. Holden agreed. He drove to her office that afternoon and handed over copies of everything, keeping the originals hidden on the ship. Vera reviewed the documents with sharp eyes, making notes, asking questions. "This toxicology report is the key," she said. "Combined with Garrett's files and your father's documentation, we can prove a pattern of behavior, poisoning, corruption, cover-up. The state attorney will have to get involved. How long before something happens? Days, maybe a week for the initial motions. The criminal investigation will take longer." She looked up at him. "But Holden, this is going to work. We are going to get your daughter back." It was the first time anyone had said those words to him. The first time in 10 years that getting Celia back had seemed like more than a desperate fantasy. He drove back to Mercer Springs feeling something he barely recognized. Hope. Fragile and uncertain but real. The feeling lasted until his phone rang again. Vera's number. He answered immediately. "Holden." Her voice was tight. "There has been a development." "What kind of development?" "Garrett Prescott is dead." The world tilted. Holden pulled over to the side of the road. "What happened?" "Car accident. Single vehicle. Went off a bridge about 20 miles from Mercer Springs. Happened around midnight last night. Police are calling it an accident. He was driving too fast, lost control." She paused. "But the timing is suspicious." "Dorothea." "That is my thought too. But proving it is another matter. Garrett's confession dies with him now. The evidence he gave you is still valid. But without his testimony, we still have everything else. My father's investigation, the tapes, the photographs, the medical records." "Yes, but Garrett was our key witness. He was going to testify that Dorothea killed Lenore. Now it is circumstantial evidence and a dead informant. Any defense lawyer worth their fee will tear it apart." Holden sat in silence, processing. Garrett had tried to do the right thing. Finally, after years of complicity, he had tried to make amends. And it had killed him. Dorothea had reached out from wherever she was and eliminated the threat, just like she had eliminated Thomas Whitmore. Just like she had eliminated Lenore. Just like she had tried to eliminate Holden by taking everything that mattered to him. "What do we do?" he asked. "We move forward with what we have. The state attorney is still interested. Judicial corruption is enough to proceed. But the murder case just got a lot harder." Vera's voice softened. "I am sorry, Holden." After the call ended, Holden sat in his truck staring at nothing. The hope that had bloomed in his chest an hour ago was not gone, but it was wounded. Garrett's death changed things, made everything more difficult. But it did not change what Holden had to do. He drove back to the ship and resumed his search. His father had said everything was here. The truth was in these walls. Maybe there was something else, something he had not found yet. For hours he searched, through compartments he had already checked, into spaces he had overlooked, looking for anything that might strengthen his case. In the engine room, wedged behind a pipe that had rusted nearly solid, he found another box. Inside were more audio recordings, cassette tapes old and dusty. He found a battery-powered player in his father's supplies and started listening. Most were conversations between Silas and various people, lawyers, investigators, sources who had provided information about the Prescotts, methodical documentation, of his decade-long investigation, but one tape was different. It was labeled simply Dorothea. Holden pressed play. Static. Then his father's voice. "This is Silas Mercer. December 5th. Recording a phone call received at approximately 3 in the afternoon." A pause. Then Dorothea Prescott's voice, cold and controlled. "Mr. Mercer, I am calling to give you a courtesy warning." "What kind of warning?" "Stay out of the custody matter. It has been decided by the courts. Any attempt to interfere will be dealt with accordingly." Decided by courts you bought, witnesses you bribed, a judge in your pocket. Those are serious accusations. Do you have proof? "I am working on it." A long pause. When Dorothea spoke again, her voice had changed. Darker, more threatening. "You do not want to go down this road, Silas. I do not take challenges well. Things happen to people who get in my way. Bad things. Is that a threat? It is a fact. Ask Thomas Whitmore about challenging me. Oh, wait. You cannot. He is dead." The line went dead. Holden stopped the tape, rewound it, played it again. Dorothea had just admitted on tape that she was dangerous, that she had been involved in Thomas Whitmore's death, that people who challenged her ended up hurt. This was evidence, real damning evidence that could not be explained away. He kept searching the tapes. More conversations, more threats. Garrett's voice on several of them warning Silas to back off, hinting at what Dorothea was capable of. By the time Holden finished listening to everything, the sun had set. He sat in the captain's quarters, surrounded by tapes and transcripts, and felt the weight of 10 years pressing down on him. He had it all now. Every piece of evidence his father had collected. Financial records, photographs, audio recordings, medical proof of poisoning, witness statements. Enough to bring the Prescotts down. Enough to get Celia back. But first, he had to make sure he survived long enough to use it. Dorothea knew he was here. She had already eliminated Garrett. She would not hesitate to do the same to him if she thought he was a threat. He needed to be smart, careful. He needed to move fast, while also protecting himself and the evidence. His phone buzzed. A text from Vera Ashburn. State attorney moving forward. Arrest warrant being prepared for Dorothea Prescott. Police will do welfare check on Celia tomorrow. Holden read it twice. Tomorrow. After 10 years of waiting, after everything he had been through, it was finally happening. He started to reply when another text came through. But then, 3 more words that changed everything. Celia is missing. Holden's blood went cold. He called Vera immediately. "What do you mean missing?" Police went to the Prescott residence to do a preliminary check before the warrant was issued. The house was empty. Neighbors said they saw Dorothea and Celia leave yesterday afternoon with suitcases. No one knows where they went. She ran. Dorothea knew we were coming. It looks that way. The state attorney has issued an Amber Alert. Every law enforcement agency in 3 states is looking for them. But Holden Dorothea has resources, money, connections, places to hide. This could take time. Time. Holden did not have time. His daughter was out there somewhere with a murderer, Every hour that passed was another hour of danger. I have to find her. Let the police handle it. You getting involved could compromise the case. I do not care about the case. I care about my daughter. Vera was silent for a moment. I understand. But please be careful. If Dorothea feels cornered, there is no telling what she might do. After the call ended, Holden sat in the darkness of the captain's quarters, mind racing. Dorothea had taken Celia and run. But where the Prescotts had properties all over, vacation homes, investment properties, friends who owed them favors. Then he remembered Nadine's files, the documentation she had kept for years tracking the Prescotts' movements, their patterns, their connections. He grabbed his phone and called her. "Nadine, I need your help. Dorothea took Celia and disappeared. The police are looking, but I think you might know something. They do not. Come to my house. Bring everything you have. Let us figure this out together." 20 minutes later, Holden was at Nadine's kitchen table, files spread everywhere. They went through everything. Every note, every observation, every pattern Nadine had documented over the years. "She has a vacation house here in Mercer Springs," Nadine said. "But that is too obvious. Police will check there first." "What else?" Nadine flipped through pages. "There is this. Dorothea made regular trips to a small town in Pennsylvania. Smithfield. Population barely 1,000. She went there 3 or 4 times a year, always alone, always for just a day or two. Why? She said she was visiting a friend. Someone named Constance. But I could never figure out who this person was or why Dorothea would go all that way to see her." Holden studied the notes. Smithfield, Pennsylvania. A tiny town in the middle of nowhere. The kind of place where someone could hide without being noticed. "That is where she is," he said. "That is where she took Celia. You cannot know that for sure." "No. But it is the only lead we have, and I cannot sit here waiting while my daughter is out there with that woman." Nadine looked at him for a long moment. Then she nodded. "I am going with you." "Nadine, do not argue. I have been complicit in this nightmare for 10 years. Let me help fix it." They left within the hour, driving through the night toward Pennsylvania. Toward Celia. Toward an ending that had been 10 years in the making. Holden did not know what he would find in Smithfield. Did not know if Dorothea was really there, or if this was just another dead end. But he knew one thing with absolute certainty. He was not gonna lose his daughter again. Not to corruption. Not to money. Not to a woman who thought she could murder and manipulate her way to control. The truth was finally coming to light, and nothing was gonna stop it. The highway stretched endlessly before them, a ribbon of darkness cutting through sleeping farmland. Holden drove with both hands tight on the wheel, eyes fixed on the road ahead, mind churning through every possible scenario of what might await them in Smithfield. Beside him, Nadine sat in silence, watching the mile markers pass. Neither of them had spoken much since leaving Mercer Springs. There was nothing left to say. Everything that mattered now lay at the end of this road. The dashboard clock read 3:47 a.m. when they crossed the Pennsylvania state line. The landscape had changed gradually as they drove east flat Ohio farmland, giving way to rolling hills and dense forests. The roads grew narrower. The towns grew smaller. The darkness grew deeper. Holden thought about Celia, 16 years old now, a young woman he did not know. Would she even recognize him? Would she believe anything he told her about her grandmother? For 10 years, Dorothea had been the only family Celia knew, the only version of truth she had ever heard. What lies had Dorothea told her? That her father was dead, that he had abandoned her, that he had never wanted her in the first place. The thought made Holden's chest ache with a familiar pain. But underneath the pain was something harder now. Determination. He had spent 10 years letting that ache paralyze him, letting it convince him that fighting was pointless, that the Prescotts had won. Not anymore. His father had fought for a decade without giving up, had collected evidence, built a case, prepared for the day when Holden would be ready to finish what Silas had started. That day had come, and Holden was not going to waste it. Dawn was breaking when they reached the outskirts of Smithfield. The town emerged from the morning mist like something from another century. A single main street lined with buildings that had not changed in 50 years. A general store with hand-painted signs. A post office the size of a garden shed. A church with a white steeple rising above the bare trees. Population 847 according to the sign. The kind of place where everyone knew everyone. Where strangers stood out like sore thumbs. Holden pulled into the parking lot of the only gas station he could find. A small building with 2 ancient pumps and a garage that looked like it had not been used in decades. An old man sat on a wooden chair by the door watching them with undisguised curiosity. "Help you folks?" the old man asked as Holden approached. "We are looking for someone. A woman named Dorothea Prescott. She might have a friend here. Someone named Constance." The old man's expression did not change. "Do not know anyone by that name. She is in her 60s, well-dressed, probably drives an expensive car. She would have arrived yesterday with a teenage girl. Mr. Folks pass through here all the time. I do not keep track of every one of them." Holden studied the man's face. There was something guarded there, something that suggested he knew more than he was saying. "This is important. The girl is my daughter. She may be in danger. Then you should call the police. The police are already looking, but I need to find her now, today, before anything happens." The old man was quiet for a long moment. Then he shook his head slowly. "Cannot help you. Sorry." Holden wanted to push harder. Wanted to grab the man by his faded jacket and demand answers. But he knew that would only make things worse. Small towns protected their own. If Dorothea had connections here, no amount of pressure would make this man talk. He walked back to the truck where Nadine was waiting. No luck. He knows something, but he is not going to tell us. Nadine looked at the town around them, the quiet streets, the curtains twitching in windows as people watched the strangers in their midst. "Then we do this the hard way. We drive every street, check every driveway, look for her car." It took 2 hours. Smithfield was small, but its roads wound through hills and hollows, past farmhouses and wooded lots, down lanes that seemed to lead nowhere. Holden drove slowly, scanning every property, looking for any sign of Dorothea's black Mercedes. They found it behind a white house at the end of a dead-end road. The house sat on a slight hill surrounded by a neat garden that had been put to bed for winter. Smoke rose from the chimney. Curtains covered all the windows. A white picket fence enclosed the front yard, the gate standing half open. And there, parked behind the house where it could not be seen from the road, was a black Mercedes with out-of-state plates. Holden stopped the truck 100 yards away, heart pounding. "That is it," Nadine said quietly. "That is her car. Stay here. Holden, please. If something goes wrong, I need you to call the police. Tell them everything." Nadine looked like she wanted to argue, but something in Holden's face stopped her. She nodded. "Be careful." Holden got out of the truck and walked toward the house. The morning air was cold and still. His footsteps crunched on the gravel driveway, impossibly loud in the silence. He reached the front porch and climbed the wooden steps, raised his hand to knock. The door opened before he could touch it. A woman stood there, mid-60s, gray hair pulled back in a severe bun, eyes that assessed him with cold calculation. Not Dorothea. Someone else. "Can I help you, T?" the woman asked. "I am looking for Dorothea Prescott. I know she is here. I do not know anyone by that name. Her car is parked behind your house." The woman's expression did not change. "I think you should leave. I am not leaving without my daughter." Something flickered in the woman's eyes. Recognition. She knew who he was. "Wait here," she said, and closed the door. Holden stood on the porch, every muscle tense. He could hear voices inside, low, urgent, an argument of some kind. Then the door opened again, and there she was. Dorothea Prescott looked exactly as Holden remembered. Poised, controlled, elegant even in casual clothes. But there was something new in her eyes now, something he had never seen before. Desperation. "Holden." Her voice was calm, but there was a tightness underneath it. "I wondered when you would find us. Where is Celia?" "Safe. Upstairs. Unaware of the drama you are causing. I want to see her." "That is not going to happen." Holden took a step forward. Dorothea did not flinch. "You do not understand the situation you are in," he said. "The police are looking for you. There is a warrant for your arrest. For murder." "Murder?" Dorothea smiled. A cold, thin smile that did not reach her eyes. "And who exactly am I supposed to have murdered?" "Lenore. Your own daughter." "Lenore died of a brain hemorrhage. A tragedy, but a natural one. The medical examiner ruled on it years ago. Before the toxicology results came back. Results that showed arsenic poisoning. Results that someone made disappear." For the first time, something cracked in Dorothea's composure. A flicker of uncertainty. "You do not have those results. No one does. My father found them, kept them safe for 10 years. I have them now, along with everything else. The financial records showing you bribed witnesses. The photographs of you with Judge Whitfield. The recordings of you threatening my father." Holden paused. Garrett's confession. Dorothea's face went pale at her husband's name. Garrett would never. Garrett is dead. But before he died, he told me everything. Gave me copies of your emails, your research on poisons, your communications with the medical examiner. Holden stepped closer. It is over, Dorothea. You are going to prison. The only question is whether you make this harder than it needs to be. Dorothea stared at him for a long moment. Then slowly her composure returned. The desperation faded, replaced by something colder, harder. You think you have won, she said quietly. You think your evidence and your lawyers and your righteous anger will be enough to take Celia away from me. She was never yours to take. She was always mine. From the moment she was born, Lenore was too weak to raise her properly, too attached to you and your poverty and your pathetic little life. Celia deserved better. I gave her better. You killed her mother. I removed an obstacle. Lenore was going to take Celia and disappear, move to some other state, raise her in squalor, cut me out of her life completely. Dorothea's voice had risen slightly. I could not allow that. Celia is my legacy, my blood. The only thing in this world that matters. Holden stared at this woman who spoke about murder like it was a business decision, who saw her own daughter as an obstacle to be removed, who had destroyed countless lives to maintain control over one child. You are insane. I am practical. There is a difference. Dorothea straightened her shoulders. Now, unless you have police with you, which I notice you do not, I suggest you leave. Celia is happy here. She is safe. She does not need a father who abandoned her 10 years ago, showing up to confuse her with lies. I did not abandon her. You took her. Semantics. The result is the same. She does not remember you. She does not want you. You are a stranger to her. Then let her tell me that herself. No. Why not? If you are so sure she does not want me, what are you afraid of? Dorothea's eyes narrowed. I am not afraid of anything. I am simply protecting Celia from unnecessary trauma. Let me talk to her. 5 minutes. That is all I am asking. Absolutely not. Then I call the police right now. They surround this house, arrest you in front of her, take her into protective custody while she watches her grandmother being led away in handcuffs. Holden pulled out his phone. Is that what you want? Dorothea's face contorted. For a moment, Holden thought she might attack him. The rage in her eyes was unlike anything he had ever seen. But then a voice came from inside the house. Grandma, who is at the door. Both of them froze. Footsteps on stairs. A shadow moving in the hallway behind Dorothea. And then Celia appeared. Holden's breath caught in his throat. She was 16 years old. Tall, slim, dark hair like her mother, blue eyes like his own. She wore jeans and an oversized sweater, and she looked tired and confused like someone who had been woken from sleep by raised voices. She looked so much like Lenore that it hurt. Grandma? Celia's eyes moved from Dorothea to Holden, studying him, trying to place his face. What is going on? Who is this? No one important, Dorothea said quickly. Just someone who has the wrong house. Go back upstairs, sweetheart. But Celia did not move. She was still looking at Holden, and something was happening in her expression. recognition maybe, or the shadow of a memory. "I know you," she said slowly, "from pictures, old pictures that Grandma said were lost." Her brow furrowed. "You are." "I am your father," Holden said. His voice cracked on the last word. "I am Holden Mercer, and I have been looking for you for 10 years. Celia's face went through a cascade of emotions: confusion, disbelief, shock. "No." She shook her head. "That is not. Grandma said my father died when I was little. She said, I know what she told you, but I am here. I am alive. I never abandoned you, Celia. I was taken away from you. By her." He pointed at Dorothea. "She bribed witnesses and bought a judge and lied to everyone to make sure I could never see you again." "That is enough," Dorothea snapped. "Celia, do not listen to him. He is disturbed, dangerous. That is why the courts took you away from him. The courts that you bought. Lies. All lies." Celia looked between them, overwhelmed. Tears were forming in her eyes. "I do not understand. I do not understand any of this." Holden took a step toward her. Dorothea moved to block him, but Celia held up her hand. "Stop. Both of you. Just stop." She was breathing hard, processing. Holden could see the war happening behind her eyes. Everything she had been told versus what she was seeing. The grandmother who had raised her versus the father she thought was dead. "Grandma." Celia's voice was quiet but steady. "You told me my father died in a car accident when I was 6 years old. You said he was gone before I could remember him. I told you what you needed to hear, to protect you." "Protect me from what?" "From knowing my father was alive. From having a relationship with him. From a man who was unfit. Who could not care for you. Who would have ruined your life. That was not your decision to make." Dorothea's face hardened. "I am your grandmother. Everything I have done, I did for you. Every sacrifice, every hard choice, all of it was to give you the life you deserved." "What hard choices?" Celia's voice was rising. "What did you do?" Holden saw his opening. "She killed your mother." The words fell like stones into still water. Celia stared at him, then at Dorothea, back at him. "What?" "Your mother did not die of a brain hemorrhage. She was poisoned. Arsenic in small doses over weeks. By the time she realized what was happening, it was too late." Holden's voice was steady. He had waited 10 years to say these words. "I have proof. Medical records. Toxicology reports. Your mother's own letters describing what was happening to her. She knew Celia. At the end, she knew. And she tried to protect you." Celia turned to Dorothea. Her face had gone pale. "Is that true?" "Of course not. He is lying. Trying to turn you against me." "Then why did we run? Why did we leave home in the middle of the night? Why are we hiding in this house in the middle of nowhere?" Dorothea hesitated, just for a second, but it was enough. Celia saw it. The crack in the facade. The moment when her grandmother's composure slipped. "Oh my God." Celia pressed her hand to her mouth. "It is true. It is actually true. Celia, listen to me. You killed my mother." Celia's voice broke. "You killed your own daughter. And then you took me. You lied to me. For 10 years, you lied to me about everything. I protected you. Everything I did was to protect you." "From what?" "From my father. From the truth." Celia was crying now, tears streaming down her face. "I had a father, a real father, and you made me think he was dead. You stole my entire life." Dorothea reached for her, but Celia pulled away. "Do not touch me. Celia, please. You do not understand. Your mother was going to take you away. She was going to ruin everything I had built for you. I could not let that happen. I could not. So you murdered her." Celia's voice was hollow. "You murdered her, and then you took me and you made me love you. You made me think you were the only family I had. And it was all a lie." Holden watched his daughter crumble, watched 16 years of carefully constructed reality shatter around her. He wanted to go to her, to hold her, to tell her everything would be okay. But he was still a stranger to her, and she needed to process this on her own terms. Dorothea made one more attempt. "Celia, sweetheart, I know this is confusing, but you have to believe me. Everything I did because I love you, because I could not bear to lose you. You do not know what love is." Celia wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. "Love does not murder. Love does not lie. Love does not steal children from their parents." She turned to Holden. "I want to see the proof. Everything you have. I want to understand what really happened." "You will, I promise. But first, we need to get you somewhere safe." Celia nodded. Then she looked at Dorothea one more time. "I do not know who you are. I thought I did. But the person I loved, the grandmother who raised me, she was not real. She was just another lie." She walked past Dorothea and out the door, down the porch steps, toward the truck where Nadine was waiting. Holden moved to follow her, but Dorothea grabbed his arm. "This is not over," she hissed. "I have lawyers, resources. I will fight this. Fight all you want. You are going to lose. You do not understand what I am capable of." Holden looked at this woman who had destroyed so many lives, who had murdered her own daughter, who had stolen his child and lied to her for a decade. "I understand exactly what you are capable of," he said. "That is why I am not leaving here without my daughter." He pulled his arm free and walked away. Behind him, he heard Dorothea calling after him. Threats, pleas, a woman watching her carefully constructed world fall apart. He did not look back. Celia was waiting by the truck. Nadine had gotten out and was standing beside her, one hand on the girl's shoulder. A small comfort from a stranger. "We should go," Nadine said quietly, "before she does something desperate." Holden nodded. He opened the truck door for Celia, helped her inside. Then he climbed behind the wheel and started the engine. In the rearview mirror, he could see Dorothea standing on the porch, watching them drive away, her face a mask of fury and desperation. Then the road curved and she disappeared from view. Holden called the police as they drove, gave them the address, told them Dorothea Prescott was there, and that there was a warrant for her arrest. The dispatcher confirmed that units would be sent immediately. It was over. Or the beginning of the end, at least. Celia sat in the back seat, silent, staring out the window. Nadine had moved to sit beside her, offering quiet comfort without pushing for conversation. They drove for an hour before Celia spoke. "Where are we going?" "Back to Ohio, to Mercer Springs. There is someone there who can help us sort all of this out. A lawyer named Vera Ashburn." "And then what?" Holden met her eyes in the rearview mirror. "Then we figure out how to be a family again, if you want that." Celia was quiet for a long moment, then softly, "I do not know what I want. I do not know anything anymore." "That is okay. You do not have to know. Not yet." They stopped at a motel outside of Pittsburgh. 2 rooms. Holden did not want to push Celia too hard, did not want to overwhelm her with his presence after everything she had been through. But she surprised him. "Can I see them?" she asked as they stood in the parking lot. "The letters. My mother's letters." Holden hesitated. Then he went to the truck and retrieved the wooden box he had brought with him. Lenore's letters, her final words. They sat in Celia's room on opposite beds while she read. Holden watched his daughter's face as she absorbed her mother's words. The concern, the fear, the love that poured from every line. He watched tears roll down her cheeks as she read the final letter, the one where Lenore had begged him to protect Celia. When she finished, Celia sat holding the papers for a long time. She knew, she finally said. She knew what Grandma was doing, and she tried to stop it. She loved you more than anything in the world. Everything she did at the end, she did to protect you. But she died, and Grandma won. Not anymore. Celia looked up at him. Really looked at him for the first time since they had met on that porch in Smithfield. "I do not remember you," she said. "I try, but I cannot. There are pieces sometimes. A voice, a feeling of being safe, but I do not have any real memories of you. You were 6 when they took you away, and Dorothea worked hard to make sure you forgot. She showed me pictures once, when I was 10 or 11, said they were of a distant relative, but I think they were pictures of you and Mom together." Celia's voice caught. "I thought you looked kind, happy. I asked who you were and she got angry. Took the pictures away. I never saw them again. She burned them, Nadine told me. Anything that might remind you of me, of us, she destroyed. Why? Why would she do all of this?" Holden thought about everything he had learned, everything his father had documented, the pattern of control and manipulation that stretched back decades. "Your grandmother is sick," he said carefully, not in a way that excuses what she did, but in a way that explains it. She cannot let go, cannot accept that other people have their own lives, their own choices. When your mother tried to be independent, tried to build a life away from Dorothea's control, she could not handle it. So she killed her. Yes. Celia closed her eyes. More tears slid down her cheeks. I loved her. Grandma. I actually loved her. She was strict and cold sometimes, but I thought she cared about me. I thought everything she did was because she wanted what was best for me. In her twisted way, maybe she did, but that does not make any of it okay. No, it does not. They sat in silence for a while. Outside, the sounds of the highway drifted through the thin motel walls. Trucks passing, cars heading somewhere. Life continuing as it always did, indifferent to the tragedies and triumphs happening within it. What happens now? Celia asked. Now we go back to Mercer Springs. You meet with Vera Ashburn and tell her everything you know. The police will want to talk to you too. It is going to be hard. Exhausting. But you will not be alone. And after that, Holden took a breath. This was the question he had been waiting for. The question he had imagined answering 1,000 times over the past decade. After that, it is up to you. The court will give me custody, I think, given everything that has happened. But I am not going to force you to do anything. If you want to live with me, we can make that work. If you need time, if you want to stay somewhere else while you figure things out, I will understand. Celia studied him, searching his face for something. Sincerity, maybe. Or the father she could not remember. You really did not abandon me. Never. Not for one single day did I stop wanting you back. Grandma said you moved on, started a new life, forgot about me. I moved to Toledo, worked odd jobs, lived in a small apartment with nothing in it except a toolbox that belonged to my father and a photograph of you. Holden's voice was rough. I did not forget Celia. I could not forget. You were always there, in every thought, every dream, every moment I wished I could take back. Celia was quiet for a long moment. Then she stood up from her bed, crossed the small space between them, and sat down beside him. I am scared, she said, of everything that is happening, of what comes next, of who I am supposed to be now that everything I believed was a lie. I know. I am scared too. You are. I have been waiting 10 years for this, dreaming about it. And now that it is happening, I do not know how to be your father. I do not know if I remember how. Celia was silent. Then slowly she leaned against him, rested her head on his shoulder. A small gesture, but it meant everything. Maybe we can figure it out together, she said. Holden put his arm around her, felt her warmth against his side. His daughter. After 10 years of emptiness, his daughter was here. Yeah, he said, his voice breaking. I think we can do that. The next 3 months passed in a blur of legal proceedings and emotional reckonings. Dorothea Prescott was arrested at the house in Smithfield 2 hours after Holden called the police. She was charged with first-degree murder in the death of Lenore Prescott, along with multiple counts of bribery, obstruction of justice, and witness tampering. The evidence was overwhelming. The toxicology reports, the financial records, the audio recordings, Garrett's files. Judge Whitfield was removed from the bench pending his own trial for corruption. The social worker who had evaluated Holden's home lost her license. 3 other witnesses came forward with their own stories of being pressured or bribed by Dorothea. The trial lasted 6 weeks. Holden attended every day, sitting in the gallery with Celia beside him. She had insisted on being there, on hearing every piece of evidence, on watching her grandmother face the consequences of what she had done. Vera Ashburn called it the most comprehensive case of family court corruption she had ever seen. The prosecution called it premeditated murder, disguised as natural death. The jury called it guilty. Dorothea Prescott was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. On the day of sentencing, she looked at Celia one final time. "I loved you," she said, her voice echoing in the silent courtroom. "Everything I did for you." Celia did not respond. She just stood, took Holden's hand, and walked out of the courtroom without looking back. The custody hearing was simpler. With Dorothea convicted and the original ruling exposed as fraudulent, there was no one left to contest Holden's claim. The new judge reviewed the evidence, listened to Celia's testimony about wanting to live with her father, and ruled immediately. Full custody to Holden Mercer, effective immediately. Celia cried when the judge read the ruling. Happy tears this time. Relief. The end of a nightmare that had lasted a decade. They drove back to Mercer Springs that afternoon, to the ship that had hidden so many secrets, to the legacy Silas Mercer had left behind. Celia walked through the captain's quarters, slowly touching the desk where her grandfather had written his logbook, running her fingers along the spines of his books. "Tell me about him," she said. "About Grandpa Silas." Holden thought for a moment. He was quiet, did not say much, but what he said mattered. "He was gone a lot when I was growing up. His work kept him at sea for months at a time. I used to resent that. Thought it meant he did not care. But he did. More than I ever knew. He just showed it differently." Holden looked around the cabin. He spent 10 years building this case, collecting evidence, waiting for the day when I would be ready to use it. He never gave up on me, even when I had given up on myself. I wish I could have known him. Me too. Celia picked up a framed photograph from a shelf. Silas as a young man standing on the deck of this same ship, squinting into the sun with a rare smile on his face. Someone had written on the back, "First voyage as captain." Scared as hell, but trying not to show it. "He looks like you," Celia said. "Same eyes, same expression when you are thinking about something." Holden took the photograph, studied his father's face. Maybe Celia was right. Maybe he had inherited more from Silas than he ever realized. Not just the tools in the ship, but the stubborn determination to do right by family, even when it cost everything. They spent the afternoon on the ship together. Celia exploring every corner, asking questions about the evidence, about the investigation, about Lenore. Holden answered everything honestly, even the hard parts, especially the hard parts. She deserved the truth, all of it. As the sun began to set, they sat on the deck watching the light paint the fields gold. "What happens to the ship?" Celia asked. I do not know. I have been thinking about that. Could we keep it? Turn it into something. Like what? A memorial, maybe. For Grandpa Silas and for Mom. A place to remember them. Holden looked at the vessel. This impossible ship in the middle of nowhere. It had been his father's refuge, his evidence vault, his final gift. Maybe it could be something else now. Something that honored the past while looking toward the future. I like that idea, he said. We could restore it together. Make it beautiful again. Celia smiled. The first real smile he had seen from her since Smithfield. I would like that too. They rented a small house in Mercer Springs a few miles from the ship. 2 bedrooms, a kitchen with mismatched appliances, a porch where they could sit in the evenings. Nothing fancy, but it was theirs. Nadine became a regular presence in their lives. She stopped by with food from the diner, helped Celia adjust to her new school, offered advice when Holden felt lost in the complexities of raising a teenage daughter. You are doing fine, she told him one evening when Celia had gone to her room to do homework. Better than fine. She is lucky to have you. I do not feel like I know what I am doing. No parent does. You just keep showing up. Keep trying. That is all any of us can do. Holden thought about his father, about 10 years of quiet, relentless work, about showing up even when it seemed hopeless. I had a good example, he said. Summer came. They worked on the ship every weekend, scraping rust, replacing rotted wood, painting over the decay. It was slow work but satisfying, something they could do together. Something that let them talk without the pressure of facing each other. Celia asked about Lenore constantly, what she was like, how they had met, what she had dreamed about for the future. Holden told her everything he could remember, the good days and the hard ones, the way Lenore had laughed, the way she had loved. I have her eyes, Celia said one day, studying an old photograph. You have a lot of her. The way you tilt your head when you are thinking, the way you hum when you are cooking. She used to do that too. I did not know that came from her. I thought it was just something I did. Maybe it is both. Maybe the best parts of us come from the people who loved us even if we do not remember them. Celia was quiet for a moment. Then she reached out and took his hand. Thank you for not giving up, for finding me. Holden squeezed her hand. Thank your grandfather. He did all the hard work. I just followed the map he left. But you came. When it mattered, you came. I will always come, no matter what. That is what fathers do. On the 1-year anniversary of their reunion, they held a small ceremony on the ship. Just the two of them with Nadine and Vera as witnesses. They placed a plaque in the captain's quarters in memory of Silas Mercer and Lenore Prescott Mercer, who loved their family more than anything and never stopped fighting for what was right. Celia read a passage from one of her mother's letters. Holden read the final entry from his father's logbook. They stood together in the space where so many secrets had been hidden, and they let go of the past. Not forgetting it, never forgetting it, but releasing its hold on them, making room for something new, That night, Holden sat on the porch of their little house watching the stars come out. The same stars his father had navigated by for 40 years. The same stars Lenore had wished on when she dreamed of a future for their family. Celia came out and sat beside him. "Dad." The words still caught him off guard sometimes, still made his heart clench with an emotion he could not quite name. "Yeah, I am glad you found me. I am glad we get to do this. Be a family." "Me too, sweetheart. More than you will ever know." She leaned against him and he put his arm around her shoulders. They sat there together watching the night deepen, listening to the sounds of the town settling into sleep. Some wounds never fully heal. They scar over. They become part of your story. But they do not have to define you. They do not have to be the end. Holden Mercer had lost his wife to murder. He had lost his daughter to corruption. He had lost 10 years to grief and hopelessness. But his father had given him a chance, a map, a trail of evidence that led back to the truth. And Holden had followed it home. He closed his eyes and listened to his daughter breathing beside him, felt the warmth of her presence, the miracle of having her back. Tomorrow there would be more work to do on the ship, more conversations to have, more moments to build a lifetime of new memories. But tonight, surrounded by silence and starlight, Holden allowed himself to feel something he had almost forgotten existed: peace. The inheritance his father had left was not the ship or the evidence or the property in Mercer Springs. It was this: the chance to make things right, the chance to bring his daughter home. And he was going to spend the rest of his life being worthy of it.